The roar of the crowd was deafening as Marcus, the famed gladiator, strode into the arena. Dust swirled around his sandaled feet, catching the light of the midday sun. His muscles tensed under the leather straps of his armor, and his grip tightened around the hilt of his gladius. He scanned the stands, briefly catching sight of the senator's box, where the city's elite sat, watching the spectacle with eager eyes. Among them was Livia, the daughter of Senator Octavius. She sat poised, her hands resting lightly on her lap, but her heart pounded in her chest. She had heard stories of Marcus, the undefeated gladiator, but this was the first time she had seen him in the flesh. His presence was imposing, his physique a testament to the harsh life of a warrior. Yet it was his eyes that held her attention, striking green, full of intensity and a depth that seemed out of place for a man of his station. The clash of steel pulled Livia's gaze back to the arena. Marcus moved with the grace of a predator, his every step calculated, every strike precise. His opponent, a seasoned fighter, was no match for him. The crowd's cheers grew louder with each blow Marcus landed, culminating in a final, swift strike that ended the fight. The defeated gladiator fell to the ground, and Marcus stood victorious, barely winded, his chest heaving with controlled breaths. As Marcus raised his sword to the crowd, his eyes once again found Livia's. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and Livia felt a strange jolt, a connection that she couldn't quite explain. She quickly looked away, her cheeks flushing with a warmth she couldn't attribute solely to the sun. That night, Livia's thoughts were consumed by the image of Marcus. She had been betrothed to a nobleman, a man of great wealth and influence, yet the thought of marriage filled her with a quiet dread. He was kind enough, but she felt no passion, no spark. Her thoughts drifted back to Marcus, and she found herself wondering what kind of man lay behind the scars and hardened exterior. Days passed, but Marcus remained in her thoughts. One evening, while attending a banquet hosted by her father, Livia overheard a conversation between her father and another senator. They spoke of the upcoming games and the prominent gladiators who would be participating. Marcus's name came up, and Livia's interest was piqued. She moved closer to hear more. "Marcus has never lost a match," her father said, his tone one of admiration. "But he's still a slave. It's a pity such a strong man is bound to the whims of the arena." Livia's heart ached at the thought. She had lived a life of privilege, but she had always been aware of the harsh realities outside her sheltered world. The thought of Marcus, a man who fought so fiercely, being little more than property, disturbed her deeply. That night, Livia made a decision. She would find a way to meet Marcus, to speak with him, to understand the man behind the legend. The opportunity presented itself sooner than she expected. The following week, her father announced a visit to the gladiator barracks to inspect the fighters before the next games. Livia insisted on accompanying him, feigning an interest in the proceedings. Her father, eager to indulge his daughter, agreed. The barracks were a stark contrast to the opulence Livia was accustomed to. The smell of sweat and metal hung in the air, and the sound of clashing swords echoed through the corridors. Livia's heart raced as they were led through the barracks, past rows of gladiators honing their skills. Then she saw him, Marcus, standing at the far end of the training yard, his back to them as he sparred with another gladiator. His movements were fluid, almost elegant, despite the brutality of the practice. When he finally turned and noticed the group, his gaze immediately found Livia. There was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, though he quickly masked it. Senator Octavius approached Marcus, engaging him in conversation about his upcoming match. Livia stayed back, her eyes never leaving Marcus's face. He was more handsome up close, his features chiseled and rugged, yet there was a softness in his expression that surprised her. When her father moved on to speak with another fighter, Livia found herself standing alone with Marcus. She hesitated, then stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. Domina, he replied, using the formal address for a noblewoman. I saw you fight in the arena, she said, searching for the right words. You were remarkable. Marcus gave a small nod. It is my duty, Domina. Livia frowned. Do you not wish for something more? A life beyond the arena? He hesitated, then met her gaze. It is not for me to wish, Domina. My fate was sealed long ago. Her heart ached at his words. But surely you deserve more than this life of blood and death. Marcus's eyes softened slightly. We all have our roles to play, Domina. Yours is to be the daughter of a great senator. Mine is to fight. But that's not fair, Livia insisted, her voice rising with emotion. You should be free. Marcus's expression remained calm, though there was a flicker of something in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or longing. Fairness is a luxury few can afford, Domina. But I thank you for your concern. Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of Livia's father, who called for her to rejoin him. As she turned to leave, she cast one last look at Marcus, her heart heavy with the weight of their exchange. Over the following weeks, Livia's thoughts were consumed by Marcus. She sought out opportunities to see him, each time learning more about the man behind the warrior. She discovered that he had been captured as a young man, torn from his homeland and forced into slavery. He spoke little of his past, but Livia could see the pain in his eyes when he mentioned it. As they spent more time together, a bond began to form between them, one that transcended the boundaries of their respective stations. Livia found herself drawn to Marcus in a way she had never experienced before. His strength and resilience were admirable, but it was his kindness and quiet dignity that captured her heart. For Marcus, Livia was a beacon of light in his dark world. She was unlike any woman he had ever known, compassionate, intelligent, and unafraid to challenge the injustices around her. He knew their relationship was dangerous, but he couldn't help the feelings that had begun to bloom in his heart. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of training, Marcus found himself standing outside the senator's villa. Livia had sent word that she wished to see him, and he had come despite the risks. As he waited in the shadows, she appeared, her form silhouetted against the light from the villa. Marcus, she whispered, hurrying to his side. I'm glad you came. I shouldn't be here, Domina, he replied, though his voice lacked conviction. Please call me Livia, she said, taking his hand in hers. We're not in the arena now. He hesitated, then nodded. Livia. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their unspoken feelings hanging between them. Finally, Livia broke the silence. I don't want you to fight anymore, Marcus. I can't bear the thought of losing you. He looked at her, his heart aching with the truth he couldn't deny. I have no choice, Livia. The arena is my life. No, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. It's not. You're more than a gladiator, Marcus. You're a man who deserves to be free. He reached out, cupping her face in his calloused hand. Livia, I am a slave. My fate is not my own. Tears welled in her eyes. But it should be. You should be able to choose your own path, to live your life as you wish. Marcus felt a surge of emotion he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He had long accepted his fate, but Livia's words awakened something deep within him, a longing for freedom, for a life beyond the arena, a life with her. I don't know how, he admitted, his voice rough with suppressed emotion. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Livia stepped closer, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. Then let me help you. We can find a way, together. He wanted to believe her, wanted to hold onto the hope she offered, but the reality of their situation loomed large in his mind. And what of your father? Your family? They would never allow it. Livia's resolve hardened. Then I will leave them. I would rather live a life of uncertainty with you than a life of luxury without you. Her words were like a dagger to his heart, cutting through the walls he had built around himself. In that moment, he knew he couldn't let her go. He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both tender and desperate. It was a kiss that spoke of longing, of hope, and of the fear that this might be their only moment together. When they finally pulled apart, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. Livia, I don't deserve you. She smiled through her tears. You deserve everything, Marcus. And I intend to make sure you get it. They spent the rest of the night together, speaking in hushed tones, planning their future, a future that seemed impossible, yet was the only one they could imagine. As dawn approached, they knew their time was running out. I'll find a way, Livia promised, her voice filled with determination. I'll find a way to free you. Marcus nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Be careful, Livia. If anyone finds out, they won't, she said firmly. I'll make sure of it. As they parted, Marcus watched her disappear into the villa, his heart heavy with both hope and dread. He knew the road ahead would be perilous, but for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe in a future beyond the arena. In the days that followed, Livia worked tirelessly to secure Marcus's freedom. She used her connections, her charm, and even her own wealth to bribe those who could help. It was a dangerous game, but she was determined to succeed. Finally, after weeks of tension and uncertainty, the day came. Livia had arranged for Marcus's release, and together they planned to flee the city, leaving behind the lives they had known for a chance at something new. On the night of their escape, Livia met Marcus at the arranged location, her heart pounding with both excitement and fear. When she saw him, standing in the shadows with a small bag slung over his shoulder, relief washed over her. You're here, she breathed, rushing into his arms. I couldn't stay away, he replied, holding her tightly. They didn't waste any time. Together, they slipped through the darkened streets of Rome, avoiding the patrols and guards that could end their dream in an instant. As they reached the city gates, Marcus took Livia's hand, squeezing it tightly. This is it, he said, his voice filled with both hope and fear. Livia looked up at him, her eyes shining with determination. We can do this. We'll find a place where we can be free. With a final glance at the city they were leaving behind, they stepped through the gates and into the unknown. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers and challenges they couldn't foresee, but they faced it together, hand in hand. For the first time in their lives, they were free, not just from the chains that had bound them, but from the expectations and constraints of the world they had left behind. They were free to carve out their own destiny, to build a life together, and to love each other without fear. And as they walked into the dawn of a new day, they knew that whatever the future held, they would face it together, with courage, with hope, and with the love that had brought them this far.